Welcome back to the second part of the presentation. The second part of the presentation will cover the actual mechanics, specifically the indicators, how they are structured, and what they consist of, and how they are actually used in the evaluation process itself. The evaluation indicators is mainly divided into two criteria. One is the management criteria, and the other is here, main projects or main business areas. Now, within management, you can see that it has many different indicators, but basically it examines how the management process is conducted, well, in terms of how the leadership, in terms of strategy and planning, is conducted. And also, it also examines whether public institution in question, how they value their role in terms of in the public. It also looks into whether the safety and environment has been well sort of emphasized in their approach to business. It also examines ethical management, whether a corruption measure has been implemented. As well as these overall management schemes, we also examine operational efficiency. Operational efficiency often includes productivity, mainly labor productivity itself. And other sort of management areas, such as personnel areas, financial areas, and organizational areas are also included. For instance, we would examine whether budget operation and financial sort of management is well conducted, and whether they have sound and viable system itself. We also examine personnel and remuneration and fringe benefit policy, whether the pay system is well structured, is it performance linked, is it well structured so that well-performing personnel are rewarded accordingly. And also we also examine labor relations as well, whether the CEO has been adept at managing labor conflicts and so on. And also we examine whether their businesses, their activities or their program management is well structured or not. So overall, management area comprises of sort of systematic ways of conducting businesses. Main projects or main business is the one that examines where the actual activities or business activities are well conducted. For instance, if we are talking about water management, then we would be examining whether the water management policy or the actual businesses are well conducted by looking at the details of their business plans and actual performance itself. As I said, about 130 to 140 institutions are subject to this evaluation process. 30 or so in the public corporation sector, and about 90 to 100 quasi-governmental institutions. And it is conducted annually and evaluated in terms of their management and main business areas. Now, once the evaluation reports are finalized, then obviously we need to sort of link their performance with their pay as well as personal decisions. So we give out final grades based on the reports that has been submitted by the evaluation committee. And it is the standing committee's role to finalize the grade. The grade is from S to E, S being superior. Very rarely institutions receive S, but those that have performed exceptionally well would be receiving superior grade. And it goes to A, B, C, D, and E. Now, institutions that receive very poor grade, E, would be subject to, once again, professional consultation. Also, institutions that receive D are subject to professional consultation as well. Now, financial rewards based on the performance-linked pay differs between public corporation and quasi-governmental institutions. The one, for instance, that receives S grade, employees would be receiving about 250% of their monthly salary for their performance. And it goes down to 0. Now, also the leaders, mainly directors and CEOs, their pay is linked between 0 and 120%. Also, directors, standing auditors rather, this is misspelled, standing auditors would be subject to 100 to 0. But quasi-government institutions are subject to sort of less variation. It's between 0 and 100 for employees, 0 to 60 for leadership positions of directors and CEOs, and auditors, 0 to 60. And as I said, the ministry would make important personal decisions, specifically the ones that receive E grade may be subject to termination of their employment. Or institutions leaders or CEOs that receive D in two consecutive years are also subject to termination as well. And that will be determined by Ministry of Economy through the Standing Committee. And auditors are also subject to performance review. And this is how we conduct auditors' evaluation. Auditors' professionalism, ethics are subject to examination, and also how they perform their internal control and internal auditing performance and integrity of institutions based on the integrity evaluation conducted by an independent board will be included. And we also have both quantitative as well as qualitative measures as well. And evaluation frequency, same thing as institutional analysis, conducted every year. And it is not applicable to individuals with less than 6 months employment. So it will be for those over 6 months. And competence and performance 50-50, as can be seen in the table. Same results for auditors, grade from S to E, and rewards are based on S to E, and also results are used to determine whether they would retain the given auditor or not. So both remuneration and also personal decisions will come after the evaluation process. And this is a sort of a list of those institutions that are subject to evaluation process by industry specification. For instance, we have those those electricity and related companies that are within the energy sector, land and transport, health and welfare, R&D, industrial promotion, as well as environmental safety, information, agriculture, and others. So basically 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 categories. And why do we have that many categories? So that each category would be subject to more specialized formulation of criteria for performance evaluation. Obviously, energy sector differs from R&D to agriculture. So each industry has its own specific characteristics, and those characteristics are sort of included, or we try to sort of take into account industrial specification and characteristics when we are making and forming those criteria and indicators. Let's go over some of the specific sort of industry-specific indicators. Now, for energy sector, we take an example of Korea Electric Power Corporation. What sort of specific criteria do we develop? For instance, we take into account whether the transmission business has been conducted smoothly and effectively. We also examine whether they have been, effective in dealing with new growth areas. Right? For instance, in the case of transmission, power outage, whether the power outage has been managed well in both qualitative and quantitative aspects. For instance, the number of power outage in minutes. Those are obviously quantitative measure. But also efforts and programs designed to manage power outage problem. Those are qualitative measures. So those are taken into account. So here we have described all in both measures as well. Now, in terms of land and transport industry, for instance, passenger service, logistics, safety management, in the case of railroads, are included. So these are sort of industry-specific. Railroads, we have passenger service, we have commercial services, and also we need to take into account whether the safety management of those business areas is well taken into account. We also have new growth areas, because if we leave only for the evaluation on static and current businesses, they have no incentive to be involved in sort of future planning and new growth areas. So we also include those criteria. So mainly these are quantitative measures. Now let's go over health and welfare industry. In the case of National Pension Service, we include, for instance, whether they have been effective in allowing citizens to sort of effectively involved in and sort of joining the pension service. So we take into account how these people have included or were able to come on board the pension service, especially the disadvantaged people. We also take into account specifics of the pension industry by looking at whether the accuracy of benefit decisions, whether the efforts to prevent failures to claim benefits are well prepared. So we do it in a quantitative measures as well. And also we come up with specific performance management criteria as well. So those are included in terms of quantitative measures. R&D, let's say that we are examining industry policy. We go over the specifics of the industry's characteristics by looking at how they dealt with intellectual property rights creation, whether what are the numbers and what is the growth rate for new cases. Also, we look at how the research spending has been sort of conducted in a transparent manner. And also, we look at how effective they have been in sort of dealing with new projects and conferring new projects and finding new sort of ventures and so on. And we also look at diffusion of results by looking at number of jobs that have been created as a result of R&D activities and so on. For instance, the loyalty received as a result of the intellectual property rights are also examined in the quantitative manner. Industrial promotion industry. For instance, we have industry promotion agencies in the area of mining. We also have one in the energy. We also have one in the information sector. It seeks to basically sort of approach in a state sort of aided approach to basically sort of jumpstart the industrial promote industrialization of targeted industries. And it looks at how the funding that are given to a specific sector or institutions have been effective. It looks at the capabilities of small to medium-sized enterprises. Often small to medium enterprises are given the state funding in order to develop the industry, right? So we look at the effectiveness of that funding. We also looked at how the system has been supporting different types of programs for small to medium firms. And these are mainly quantitative measures as well as qualitative measures. And also in terms of environmental safety, we also look at industry-specific ones. For instance, what happened to air pollution as a result? It's a very industry-specific indicators, right? What happened to greenhouse gas emission has been reduced. We also look at water quality and resource circulation projects as well in the case of Korea Environmental Corporation. So as you can tell, for each industry, we have specific indicators, but also for each corporations or public institution in question, we developed institutional specific criteria and methodology as well. Information industry, in the case of National Information Society, it seeks to sort of spread out the information and communication technology. And we look at how effective their programs have been. For instance, ICT convergence projects. Have they been involving in programs that improves e-government services? It also looks at how the use of public data has been promoted. So we look at the role of the agency in that respect. So it both include quantitative as well as quantitative, and qualitative measures as well. Lastly, agriculture and culture industry. If you look at rural community corporation, we look at sort of corporations' specific business areas and try to come up with those relevant indicators. So we look at how their infrastructure program has been conducted, the water management plan, and farmland bank program has been conducted. And we look at both quantitative and also qualitative measures. Now, having said that, now what is the sort of effectiveness of the system? How has the system, the evaluation of public institutions, what have they achieved their original objective? Has it made public institutions more accountable? Has it led them to be more productive? Has it led them to be more responsive to citizens in general and industry in general? Let's look at the result. In the beginning, I mentioned that the purpose of the evaluation system is to try to make them more accountable. Also trying to make them make more autonomous, accountable decisions, right? And numerous qualitative and quantitative surveys and examination and literature has said that accountability of public institutions generally improved. How? Because they were able to take part in the designing of the manual, the criteria, indicators, and methodology. And also they need to develop their own performance reports as well as medium to long-term plan. It enabled them to make their own decisions as to how to improve the performance of their institution. Right? So in general, accountability of public institution has improved. Also, by providing consultation to underperforming institutions, it dealt with sort of productivity issues of those in needs. So as part of its effort to provide feedback on the results and then trying to link them in the actual management process itself, it enables these underperforming institutions to improve their performance. And also, by providing and coming up with evaluation manual, it enables them to provide formal and better guidelines for public institutions. In previous years, ministries were dealing with providing executive guidelines, right? But the executive guidelines or administrative guidelines are informal. It changes every year. It is not laid out in detail, no specifics. But when we are going through the evaluation process, we need to come up with how we are going to examine each and every public institutions by coming up with an agreement on evaluation manual, right? Evaluation manual is the one that lays out the previous tables that I have shown you. How are they going to evaluate institutions? What criteria are we going to use? Is it going to be quantitative or is it going to be qualitative? If it is qualitative, then how do we measure case by case qualitatively? So the manual, by coming up with a manual and by consulting both the institutions and relevant parties, including supervising ministry as well as Ministry of Economy and Finance, we have come to a formal agreement as to each institution's role, plan, and goals. So it enabled them to come to an agreement as to what their respective roles are, especially the public institutions. And thereby, it provides clear management objective. As I said, Y minus 1 year, it provides specific goals, right? By giving you the indicators, criteria, methodology. Y year, you conduct businesses. And Y plus 1, you review and conduct the evaluation process. So clearer management objective has been achieved. And overall, we have witnessed performance improvements in many areas by containing cost and improving productivity itself as well. And overall, the evaluation system itself enabled to better understand each institution's public roles and their performance among relevant parties. For instance, supervising ministry now has a better idea as to what their plans are annually as well as medium to long term. Ministry of Economy and Finance, they have understanding of the respective public roles of each institution as well as their managerial objectives. Clearly, public institutions itself now have clear managerial objective, both short run and medium to long run. So for those parties involved in the process, it's a win-win situation. Now, over the last 15 minutes or so, I have reviewed and also provided you with the actual mechanics of the evaluation system that has been implemented for Korea's state-owned enterprise, what we call public institutions. And actual details are in the PPT, so I hope you can review some of the details that I may have not covered and hope that the Korea system is of some use to you. Thank you very much for your attention, and I hope to see you in another occasion. Thank you again.